we got the frequency from, I said that funny, frequency, from the height of the bars from the warm-up. While I was walking around, somebody asked me how I got the total, the 20. I just added all the frequencies up. So there were 20 test scores between 40 to 119. So relative frequency is found by taking your now I'm going to say it weird every time. I can do this. Taking your I can't. I'm like, my brain wants to say it funny. We're taking the frequency divided by the total. So 1 divided by 20, which when I put it in the calculator, I get 0.05. Now, I said that cumulative relative frequency graphs have multiple names. OGIVEs is one of them, which is what I call them. Don't ask me where that name comes from, because I have no clue. And then percentile graphs. So we want to put everything into percents, since really what it is a percentile graph. So 0.05, remember if you multiply by 100, it'll give you the percent, or you can move it to the right 2 decimals. So really we're looking at 5% here. And then we're going to do the same thing for the rest of them. So 2 divided by 20, which would be 10%. 1 over 20. I guess, are you guys okay if I don't show the division part and just put the percents? So this would be 25%, 30%. Cumulative frequency is, what is cumulative mean? You guys have a cumulative GPA, so what does that mean? Don't you know? Or are you just being shy? Okay. Cumulative means like, so you have your GPA, so when you get your grades for this term, you'll get a GPA, which is what you earned for this term only. Then you have your cumulative GPA, which is your GPA for all your high school classes. So it's like a running total. So here, when we talk about cumulative frequency, it's going to be a running total. So here, I had one score between 40 to 49. I didn't have any scores prior to that, so the frequency there is just 1. 50 to 59 had 2 scores, but we're also going to add the 1 from the previous range of scores. So really, we're just taking the numbers and adding everything prior to it. So here, we had 1 plus 2 plus 1, which would give us 4. 5 plus those 4 would give us 9. 6 plus those 9 give us 15. 2 plus those 15 give us 17. 2 plus those 17 give us 19, and then 20. Your last number in your cumulative frequency column should be what your total is. So like we were dividing out at 20. My last row in that column is 20, so I know I did it right. Then the last one we're going to do is cumulative relative frequency, which is the cumulative frequency divided by the total. So we're going to take this column and we're going to divide by 20. So 1 divided by 20, which which still is 5%. This time it's 3 divided by 20, which would give us 15%. 4 divided by 20 would be 20%. 9 would be 45. 15 times 5 would be 50, 75. So that'd be 85, 95, and 100. And when we're making our table, the last entry in the cumulative relative frequency should be 100%. If we've done everything correct, because we're taking 20 divided by 20. Then we're going to use that information to create a cumulative relative frequency graph. Like I said, it's also known as an ogive, or also known as a percentile graph. I will say ogive. In your homework, it'll probably say cumulative relative frequency graph because that is the technical name. But that's just so much easier to say. But I really have no clue where it came from. Like, you would think the letters would mean something. No. So when we make our ogive, we're going to put the scores across the x-axis, and then we're going to put our cumulative relative frequency on the y. Let's see, I'll use this color. So we want to start everything at 0, and yes, that does mean we're going to have a little space until we get to 40. We're going to go up to 120, just for the sake of using nice numbers rather than 119, which means 60s in the middle. And then I would have 5 in between. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110. And then I'm just gonna, I'm gonna label all of them. I was thinking I wouldn't, but I think it'll be helpful if we have all of our hash marks labeled. And then label it scores. I almost forgot that part, sorry. And then, like I said, on the y, we're going to do the cumulative relative frequency, which goes up to 100%. So I'm going to make the top 100. Halfway in between is going to be 50. 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, 70, 80, 90. And I'm going to abbreviate it as CRF because cumulative relative frequency is a lot direct. And it is measured in percent, so I put my percent symbol in parentheses. Any questions so far? Okay, now here's the part where I always have kids who don't like this part. I don't know how else to say it. So when we graph, we're going to use the bottom half of the score range. And then we're going to use the cumulative relative frequencies. So we're going to be using our last column, first and last column. The columns in between were just to help us get to this point. The weird part is that you're gonna like stagger them. So for 40, there are 0% of the scores that are at or below 40. So my first score is 40, but I'm gonna start here at 0. Don't start at 5%. And that's the thing that always throws kids off with these. Then 50, by the time I've reached a score of 50, 5% of the scores have happened. So at 50, I want to be up at 5%. And that's what I mean by staggering. So 60 goes with 15. They're off by 1. If you look at them, I'm at the third one down here, but only the second one down over here. So by 60, I've had 15% of the scores. And then at 70, we're up at 20. And then 80 jumps to 45. 90 is at 75. 100 is at 85. 110 is 95. And then by the time I reach 120, I've had 100% of the scores. Questions? And then we connect them. And we connect them with very rigid lines. Not like try to make it nice and continuous like in any other math class. You really just, you're connecting the dots. Questions so far? Alright, now here's, at least I think it's cool. Here's the cool thing about OGIVEs, is if I give you an OGIVE or a percentile graph or a cumulative relative frequency graph, whatever you want to call it, I can then ask you to find your 50th percentile or your median. I can ask you to find the first quartile or the 25th percentile, the third quartile or the 75th. I could even ask you to find the interquartile range, because these numbers over here correspond to the percentile. So like my 50th percentile, to make sure my ruler's straight, if I make a dashed line out to my line, and then drop down from there, I would say that my median or my 50th percentile is about 80, 82, 83, somewhere in there. It's pretty, it's far enough away but not quite halfway there, so I would say 82 or 83. So the median, which, just as a reminder, is the 50th percentile. Am I off the screen? No. Okay. We would say about 82 or 83. I'll put 83. Then we could do the same thing for our Q1 and our Q3. Q1, remember that gives you the first 25% of the data when you're breaking it into quartiles. So Q1's the 25th percentile. So if I come over here, 25, and then I drop down, I would say it's about 72, 73. I'll go with 73. It looks like about the same distance right there. So about 73. Could do the same thing for Q3. Q3 is the 75th percentile.
Q2 is the 50th percentile is the median?
Yeah. Q2 is also known as the median. 75 would be what? 60, 75. I don't think my ruler is straight. Oh, it is pretty straight because the 75th percentile is given in my cumulative relative frequency. And look at that, I ran right into my dot. So our Q3 is 90, about 90. So then I could ask you to find the IQR, which is Q3 minus Q1.
Can I go to the bathroom?
Yes, Hayden, go ahead. You're welcome. So that would be 90 minus 73, so 17, about 17 for IQR. I could ask you to find a random percentile too. These are just the most common, but I could say find the, let's see, the 60th percentile. So you would go to 60, and you would go across. So these allow you to find different percentiles, and then it allows us to ask you lots of cool questions. At least I think so. You guys may not like it. Looks like the 60th percentile is about 85, which makes sense because my median, the 50th percentile, is I think around 83. There's some other cool things about OGIVEs. Like the fact that we connect the dots rigidly. The line that has the steepest slope would correspond to the tallest bar in your histogram. So our tallest bar in our histogram from the warm-up was that 80 to 90 range. And if I look from 80 to 90, it does 70, 80 is a pretty steep slope, but you can see it's almost more straight up and down between 80 and 90. So your steepest slope in an ogive corresponds to the tallest bar in a histogram, or the most frequency. I will tell you right now that you will have to create an ogive on your next unit test. You will have to fill in the table, create the ogive. Hannah.
Where is the IQ on that?
So IQR comes from Q3.
I know it comes from, but like where?
So it would be, let's see, I'm going to use a highlighter. So here was my Q1, and here's my Q3. So it's that range right there. So from here to to here, which represented 17 from this one to that one, from purple to green. So that's the middle 50% of the data.
What's the 68th percentile?
That was just showing that we can ask for random percentiles and you should be able to find them. So these median Q1, Q3 are obviously the most common percentiles, but that doesn't mean I can't throw a random percentile at you and ask you to find it. Did I clarify?
Why would it be there if it's 17?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Why would it be there if it's only 17?
Because the IQR takes your value of Q3, 90, minus your value of Q1, which is 73. So the middle 50% of the test scores would fall between 73 and 90. So 50% of the data is in that bar or line right there. Did that clarify quite well?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. So you guys are going to practice one now. I gave a different set of test scores that kind of blend in, but there are 20 test scores right here. Fill in the table, make your ogive. You don't need to answer the question below. We'll get to that as a whole group. I mean, if you want to, you can, but we'll do it as a whole group. I don't think I took attendance yet.
So this is the source for the Yeah.
You have the black cards on your dash. What would you use with the one that was tried up?
So everything about the dash line,
Yeah. Not yet.
This
And
is
then
like,
she wouldn't be special. It's still one of her friends. So,
So it's 60. It's like
thank you. This little, this episode. What? TikTok?
It's weird.
I think I'm just bad at drawing.
You connected your dots very smoothly, and it shouldn't be that way.
Oh, okay.
it's just connect each dot.
Last year there was never been
Or I'll show you.
Well, once you start everything down here, that's the quarter.
60 is like near. Scared me with it. Will you label your C's?
Oh, yeah.
Alright, so biggest thing I saw walking around is that some of you forgot to start at 0 for 60. It's a weird thing because we're used to this goes with that, but you're going to start off by 1. So by the time we get to 60, 0% of the test scores fall between 0 to 59. So we have 0% are below 60. To 70, 10% of the test scores were below that. So you're always going to be off, like staggering, when you put these on your graphs. That's the biggest thing I saw. You guys were great at filling in the table. I just saw a lot of you that forgot to start it at 0 down. Any questions? Hannah?
Wouldn't it just be the same from 90 to 100?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
From 90 to 100, would it just be
So at 90, you should be at 85. And then at 100, so 60 should be at 0. 70 should be at 10. 80 should be at 1. 81 at 100. All right, so now we're going to look at individuals rather than our whole distribution. So down below it says that Luke scored an 88. How well did he do on the test? So walking around, I had a couple of you that were like, oh, I can just go to approximately 88 on here. And then go back and find how well he did, which is a good approach when you don't have the actual data. My line is not straight though, sorry. But since we have the actual test scores up here, we can find how well Luke did exactly. We don't have to use our OGIVE to estimate. So it tells us that Luke scored an 88, which is this one right here. So Luke scored better than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 of his peers. And if we take 16 divided by 20, because there were 20 test scores, we find that that's 80%, which my line was not by 80. So if you have the actual data, you want to use it. If I give you an OGIVE and ask you to find answers from it, know that it's going to be perfect. It's not going to be hand hash marks. It's going to be exactly the same intervals. So he scored better than 16 of his peers out of 20, so that's 80%. So he scored better than 80%. That is also known as the 80th percentile. So, I think I brought it up with you guys when we talked about percentiles, just briefly in the last unit when we were talking about quartiles. The most common scenario that I can think of when you guys have heard percentiles before is like when you get your PSAT or your SAT scores or any sort of standardized test score. Somewhere on the report, they tell you your percentile. And that tells you that your score, like here, Luke's score was better than 80% of the class. So he's at the 80th percentile. So he did better than 80%. The other commonplace, although I don't think you guys would hear it now, is growth charts. So when you're little, like when I take my kids to the doctor for their annual checkup, there's actually a chart the doctor will plot my kid's height and weight on, and then she'll tell me what percentile my kids are at. So that's the other time that you actually hear it, not when you're just talking about statistics. Doctor, standardized test score, not just a statistics math problem. They do show up. I'm trying to think of other ones, but I can't. So just a little more information about percentiles. The p percentile of a distribution is the value with p% of the observations less than it. That is the key there. So if we have a score like Luke's at the 80th percentile, 80% of the scores were less than his. We don't include his when we are doing the percentile. I told you guys the 100th percentile was a myth. That's because you can't have 100% of the scores less than a score. It wouldn't work that way. If you have 10 scores and you're looking at the highest one, it's not going to be the 100th percentile because there's only 9 scores less than it, so it's actually the 90th percentile. So here, Tiffany and George both got 75% on the test. We're going to calculate the percentile for these two students. I say from the OGIVE, we're not going to use the OGIVE. I need to edit that, sorry. We're going to use the actual test scores. So we're looking at, they both got 75. So that is these two scores right here. We do not include those scores when we are calculating a percentile. We only look at the number of scores below those. So there's 1, 2, 3 test scores below theirs, and there were 20 total. So we're looking at them being in the, 3 times 5 is the 15th percentile. I'm going to add a question here. I want you guys to figure out a score of 80 is what percentile? Using the same test data. A score of 80 is, I should say, at what percentile? had to say different. Thank you. All right. Score of 80 is at what percentile? I saw lots of correct answers out there. Anybody want to share?
45%.
Thank you, Kyler. 45%. Oops. There we go. So here's our multiple 80s. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 test scores below it. So 9 out of 20, which would give us the 45th percentile. And I'm going to add one more question here. What score corresponds to the 65th percentile? Oops, I could draw a 6. So this time you're working backwards, still using those test scores up there. Which score corresponds to the 65th percentile? Yeah, but one off is still wrong, right? All right. No, I didn't. How is that? How am I under the bus?
Didn't expect him to get anything right.
No, I just was surprised.
I see where everything going now.
All right. So 65th percentile. That tells you the percent below the score you're looking at. So Cheyenne, I didn't want to make you walk all the way up here, but she had on her paper 0.65 times 20, which is 13. So there are 13 test scores below the one we're looking for. So we want to count to the 14th test score, not the 13th. And actually, I'm going to count backwards to 6. Because 20 minus 14 would be 6. If I can get my paper shown. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would put 14, 13 below. Oh man, now I confused myself. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Right here, 81. That would be a score that is at the 65th percentile. which quite a few of you had. I did have some of you that said 80. Just remember the 13 is the number below, so you would actually count to the 14th test score. Some of you have already started down here. Those are for you to try on your own. This time, because it's not out of 20, it's out of 30, you will have decimals on your percentiles, and that's okay. So you might get something like the 17.6 percentile. Decimals are okay. My example had 20, so it always came out to a nice even percent. Right? I'm sorry. I'm a failure. Is that better?
No. I was just texting with
Tell your friends. Shouldn't they be in class?
yeah. Do you want to say something to my friends?
Get off the phone.
Do you want to say that to my friends?
Yeah.
They get a kick out of that. Can I take a video of you saying get off your phone? You ready?
Yeah, are you ready?
Let me ask my man.
Get off your phones and pay attention in class. I know, you're doing great. And your birthday.
What's that? I think my parents said they were going to register, so it's been
That is a new trend.
yeah, so the radius will be rather too.
For your birthday. So is the whole idea you're using an Airbnb?
Isn't it everything that
No,
No,
because my family is coming down, or not you, but they don't want to stay in the same house as my family because they're not that. So we have to live.
Your friend?
Yeah. But still,
You're not the first kid that I've heard that turned that.
They used to be when I was like, I did when I eat pretty for my birthday. When I was like,
What?
this one, wire this one.
Oh, Nate's this one.
The Minnesota Twins.
Maybe 66, but
Yeah, no, but she did.
Son? Maybe $10. Buddy. Well, that equals a big jump from $10.
Yeah. You're so Do you like my mom? Yeah. I told you. Yeah. Yeah. I told her
I did that
she
shit.
was slightly confusing, so I told her like this and felt like she was like, I'm not that kind of brain. But then we went and she's like, if you see your skin, you have to be sure everything to do. and go through the answers on the board for me.
So I have to do my math next for the answer.
Well, I would love to see math. I mean, it is math class, but no, because you would only have 22 teams with wins less than. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So it's the first one always.
You didn't hear me. Want to say it louder? She was picking on your handwriting.
It hasn't changed since like 3rd grade.
I'm
not kidding.
Wait, are you supposed to know? It's my brother's right.
Well, then you should be used to it.
Yeah. I'm just too smart.
I had one kid in AP stats, and I swear, he just scribbled. I think he thought that if I couldn't read it, I would just pass him because I couldn't read it. And I was like, I can't read this, so I would just give him an excellent test because I could not read it. Like, I am pretty good at deciphering what things say, but I could not read this guy's. He never argued with me. Every once in a while, I'd be like, oh, no, that word. Yeah, but you type them.
Not an AP English, like the time rights.
What did that be? In percentile for?
For A?
Yeah.
No, it's the 10th percentile. He meant 30.
Yeah.
3 divided by 30.
Okay. Oh, you're.
See, he has 30s on the others. But if it was out of 20, you would have been right, Tyler. Would have been 13. Ethan.
I'm super confused because I got like one number above everything he was dividing.
So you don't want to include the number you're looking at. So like 66 games is right here.
Yeah, that'd be 4.
The percentile is the number below it. So there's 3 teams that won less than 66 games. So we would do 3 out of 30.
Okay.
Alex.
Wouldn't like the same, but they have different. So then they have 22 scores below and then 23 scores below.
Well, no. So there are 2 93s, but there's only 22 teams with less than 93 wins. So you don't include either of them. They are at the same percentile because it's like, this is going to be a horrible analogy, but like, have you ever watched a golf tournament? When they have the same score, they'll skip spots. Like, they're tied for second, say they're both on like 6 under par, and there's 2 of them. It'll go first place, second place, 4th place. They will skip it. So they are at the same percentile. We just look at the number below.
You watch golf?
My dad's a huge golfer, so yes, I watched a lot growing up. Sadly. It's very boring.